African Youth Protest, the Real Decolonization Project. Hi, I'm Noban Limkuni, an international relations student at Africa University, and today I'll be exploring youth participation in decolonial democracy with insights from Kenya's GenZ protests.
A culturally rich and diverse campus. State-of-the-art teaching technologies and facilities. Cutting-edge academic programs that are transformative, stimulating, innovative, and prepare you to leave your mark on Africa and beyond. Africa University offers you this and so much more. We are a private Pan-African United Methodist Church related institution that is a hub of student-centered learning and a truly international campus experience. We are accepting applications from dynamic, driven, and passionate students from all over Africa for our August 2024 intake for undergraduate and graduate degrees. For more information on our programs on offer and how to apply, please visit our website at www.africau.edu or send an email to studentrecruitment@africau.edu or call us on +263 712 609 487. Africa University, investing in Africa's future.
Africa is experiencing a surge in youth activism and is changing the face of politics across the continent. Young Africans are no longer waiting for change, they are driving it. The growing number of young people involved in activism is a testament to their determination. Youth activism is holding leaders accountable and pushing for policy changes from climate change to education reform. Young people are making their voices heard.
They're telling us about the need to reform SARS and the police force, but nothing has been happening.
Despite progress, young activists face challenges and obstacles. However, opportunities for growth, collaboration, and innovation in youth activism are vast.
Increase police salary so that they are adequately compensated for protecting lives and property of citizens. I've seen a video of one police barrack. A beggar cannot stay there.
Youth activism is reshaping Africa's political landscape. Join the movement, amplify their voices, and together, let's build a brighter future for Africa.
In 2024 and 2025, Kenya's streets became the site of an extraordinary political awakening. Young people, predominantly from the Generation Z, mobilized in unprecedented numbers against unpopular government policies, particularly the proposed finance bill, and later against perceived authoritarianism and corruption. These protests, which spread across the country and gained international attention, were not simply about taxation or economic hardship. They represented something deeper, a generational revolt against the colonial logics that continue to structure African democracies. Viewed through the lens of decolonial scholarship, particularly from the works of Walter Mignolo and Sabelo Ndlovukajeni, the Kenyan protest can be understood as part of a broader struggle for what may be called a decolonial democracy, a political system that seeks to transcend the colonial legacies embedded in African governance. So first, we'll have to unpack the concept of decolonialism. To grasp the significance of the GenZ uprising, One must first understand the concept of coloniality. As Walter Mignol explains, coloniality is the darker side of modernity, the continuation of colonial power structures even after the end of formal colonial rule. In Africa, coloniality manifests in political systems that were imported from Europe during independence, privileging Western models of liberal democracy over indigenous traditions of governance. Savile Ndlovu builds on this by describing the coloniality of power and the coloniality of being, terms that highlight how colonial logic still shape both institutions and identities. In the political sphere, this legacy is evident in the persistence of authoritarian institutions inherited from colonial administrations, the privileging of Western metrics of good governance, and subordination of African democracies to global financial and diplomatic pressures. Kenya is emblematic of this reality. Its multi-party system, judiciary, and parliamentary structures are rooted in British colonial legacies. These institutions often reproduce inequality, corruption, and exclusion rather than serving as vehicles of popular empowerment. For many young Kenyans, therefore, democracy appears not as liberation, but as a continuation of colonial systems under a different name.
Take your next step towards success and further your education with Africa University, a world-class center of excellence and a higher institution of choice for leadership development in Africa. We are a private Pan-African institution which is home to close to 30 African nationalities. We offer over 50 academic programs, from undergraduate studies to PhD programs. Enroll with us for the March and August intakes. Africa University, investing in Africa's future.
The GenZ protests of 2024 and 2025 erupted initially to responses to proposed tax hikes that would have worsened already dire economic conditions. Yet, the protests quickly evolved into a broader critique of governance, accountability, and leadership in Kenya. What made these protests unique was not only their scale, but also their character. They were leaderless, digitally organized, and infused with creativity, humor, and defiance. Unlike traditional opposition politics, which often replicate the same elite-driven structures, the GenZ movement emphasized grassroots participation and collective agency. This refusal to be co-opted by political elites echoed through decolonial principles, rejecting colonial era hierarchies and exposing the failures of post-colonial governance, and demanding a recentering of democracy around ordinary citizens rather than elites or external actors. Here, the legacy of imperialism was clear. Kenya's heavy debt to global financial institutions and external powers had constrained its sovereignty, shaping fiscal policies that disproportionately burdened the poor. Protesters thus framed their struggle not only as resistance against a national government, but also against a broader global order that perpetuates Africa's dependency, what Ndlovu terms the coloniality of global power. The Kenyan protests raise a profound question. If inherited democratic models are colonial at their core, what would a decolonial democracy look like? Decolonial democracy seeks to transcend the colonial legacies embedded in African governance systems. Rather than privileging imported structures such as adversarial multi-party competition or rigid constitutionalism modeled on European systems, it draws on African traditions of communal governance, consensus building, and Ubuntu. In this vision, democracy is not merely the performance of elections under Western observation, but the cultivation of dignity, justice, and accountability rooted in local histories and experiences. Mignolo's call for epistemic disobedience, the refusal to accept Western frameworks as the only legitimate knowledge system, resonates strongly here. For Kenyan youth, rejecting the colonial template of democracy means creating space for new forms of political integration. Similarly, Ndlovu idea of epistemic freedom highlights the need to liberate African politics from the straitjacket of Western political categories, allowing for the creation of authentically African democratic practices. Kenya's GenZ protests can thus be read as part of a wider continental trend, but they also stand out as a powerful case study in youth-led decolonial resistance. The protests rejected not only government policy, but also the entire logic of elite-driven, donor-validated, colonial-style governance. By organizing horizontally, leveraging digital tools, and refusing co-optation, the GenZ activists enacted a form of politics that was participatory, creative, and accountable. Their demands for justice, dignity, and genuine sovereignty echoed the unfinished project of decolonization. If independence in the 1960s represented decolonization 1.0, the end of formal empire, the Gen Z protests represent decolonization 2.0, the dismantling of coloniality in governance and construction of a democracy rooted in African agency. The Gen Z protests in Kenya are more than an episode of political unrest. They're a decolonial moment. By challenging both the failures of post-colonial elites and the global structures that constrain African sovereignty, Kenya's youth are asserting a new vision of democracy that transcends the legacies of imperialism. Their movement embodies what Mignolo calls the refusal of colonial epistemologies and what Luvu Kajeni describes as a search for epistemic freedom. Ultimately, the question these protests raise is not whether African democracies can survive in their current form, but whether they can be reborn in decolonial terms. For if democracy is to serve the people of Africa, it must be stripped of its colonial baggage and reimagined through the lived experiences, struggles, and aspirations of Africans themselves.